found her that day.
Shadow Climate Secretary Ed Miliband is calling on the government to bring forward a proper windfall tax on energy companies after BP announced its biggest yearly profit in history. The energy giant has more than doubled its earnings from the year before, earning £23 billion in profits in 2022 after energy prices surged due to the war in Ukraine. BP Chief Executive Bernard Looney says stronger plant reliability and a lower cost of production helped with profits. The BBC chairman will face questions in the Commons on his involvement in Boris Johnson's financial affairs prior to being chosen to lead the broadcaster. Richard Sharp will appear before a cross-panel party of MPs this morning. It's after it was revealed he was involved in Mr Johnson securing a loan of up to £800,000 before the then Prime Minister backed his appointment to the top role at the BBC. His selection is currently under investigation. The Shadow Defence Secretary is to argue cuts to the British Army must be halted to show the UK is a leading European member in NATO. In a speech at the Royal United Services Institute today, John Healey will outline Labour's plans to ensure the UK's duty to the alliance are fulfilled in full. It follows Defence Secretary Ben Wallace conceding the armed forces had been hollowed out and underfunded. Nurses are staging industrial action again today in an ongoing dispute over pay. It follows what was called the biggest strike in NHS history yesterday, with the Royal College of Nursing, GMB and Unite, paramedics and ambulance workers walking out. Health leaders have described this week as incredibly disrupted. Unions have urged ministers in England to offer a new pay deal to prevent further action, but ministers say they want to look forward to next year's pay. This is GB News. More from me shortly. Now, though, it's back to Bev.
Very good morning. Welcome to Bev Turner today on GB News TV and DAB Plus Radio. Here's what's coming up on the show this morning. Prime Minister Rishi Sunak has been looking for a new party chairman for over a week now after the sacking of Nadhim Zahawi. He's going to announce his mini reshuffle later this morning and reorganise some government departments. Let me know who you'd like to see as the new Tory party chairman. GBViews at gbnews.uk. It's been announced this morning that energy giant BP has made £23 billion in profits in 2022 after energy prices surged due to the war in Ukraine. This is in the same week that Shell announced that they earned £32 billion in the same year. Labour are now calling for what they call a proper windfall tax. I'm going to be discussing that with Howard Cox from Fairfuel UK in just a moment. And the former advisor to Michael Gove, Charlie Rowley, and author Amy Nickel will be in my studio looking at the biggest stories of the day on the panel this morning. We're going to be reflecting on this developing story that an international aid effort is being stepped up in southern Turkey and northern Syria following that huge earthquake which has killed now more than 4,800 people. And of course, you are my third panellist. I would love to hear from you this morning. Email me, gbviews at gbnews.uk, or tweet me at gbnews to have your say. So Rishi Sunak is set to announce a mini reshuffle later this morning, including a new party chairman. This is, of course, after the PM sacked Nadhim Zahawi over his tax affairs more than a week ago. Let's cross live to Westminster and speak to our political editor, Darren McCaffrey. Good morning, Darren. Just explain to us, what exactly is a mini cabinet reshuffle like this and why now?
It's moving a couple of decks, I suppose. A couple of chairs, I should say, on the decks, if you like, in the sense that governments, prime ministers like to, in any organisation, like to assert their authority. That means moving people and things around. Now, clearly this has been brought about in part because Nadhim Zahawi, as the former Conservative Party chairman, is no longer in place, having had or having been sacked, frankly, a couple of weeks ago. And so there was always going to be an effort to try and find a replacement for him ahead of those crucial local elections in just a couple of months' time, and indeed the general election probably almost certainly next year. Now, in addition to that, there's been much talk about kind of trying to impose the Prime Minister's authority and his preferences and his ideological stint, if you like, on government. And that is why we're likely to see, for example, the Department of Energy being recreated again. At the moment, it is inside the business department, if you like. It had been a standalone department under people like David Cameron and Theresa May. That's likely to return. Again, maybe not a surprise given the fact that our energy security is in a pretty bad place at the moment. And then you add on to this a focus, I think, on science and technology too, with the creation probably of a separate ministry focusing on those two, maybe with incorporation of digital as well. Again, this is something that the Prime Minister's talked about an awful lot in the past, trying to make the UK a science powerhouse. But then there are further questions about where does that leave, for example, the Department of Culture, Media and Sports. Are there going to be changes there? And indeed, who are the personalities who are going to be in charge of these departments? So there's lots of speculation. Cabinet was due to meet around now, actually, in Downing Street. That is being pushed back to 3 o'clock this afternoon as we await the announcements to find out precisely what is happening.
Darren, we heard about this situation with Boris Johnson and the chair of the BBC, didn't we? So Richard Sharp is his name. He's going to be grilled today, is he, on a Commons committee? Do we know what we're expecting them to basically look for in that interview?
Yeah, so it's just started actually at 10 a.m. Richard Sharp, who's the current chairman of the BBC, is in front of MPs answering questions. Now, this in part will revolve around, as you say, those allegations and precisely what his role were in helping Boris Johnson secure effectively an £800,000 loan when he was Prime Minister. Now, Richard Sharp has said effectively he's not really been involved in Boris Johnson's financial affairs at all, though he did introduce the person who effectively gave him or allowed him access to that amount of money. The reason that this is interesting is, or the reason it's controversial, I may suggest, is because this was at a time in which Richard Sharp was trying to become chairman of the BBC, the decision that ultimately was in the hands of the then Prime Minister, Boris Johnson, and people frankly saying it does not look good. Now, Richard Sharp has denied any of this, as has Boris Johnson, both of them suggesting that there was due process involved in all this, that it was a rigorous process. But clearly there are questions to be answered about what precisely his role may well have been. And he'll, I'm sure, use this attempt this morning in front of MPs to set the record straight, I think, in that regard, but also to talk about that rigorous process, to talk about his appointment, in essence trying to dampen down those allegations, that controversy around his appointments.
OK, thank you very much, Darren. No doubt we will let you know how that hearing goes with Richard Sharp this morning, see what comes out of that. And let me know what you think about this cabinet reshuffle. GBViews at gbnews.uk. Is there anybody that you would particularly like to see as being chairman of the Conservative Party? I did stop myself from when Darren talked about the fact that there were moving deck chairs. I thought, well, there's a famous saying about moving deck chairs on the Titanic, doesn't it? It doesn't matter where you sit. You might be going down anyway. They're going to have an awful lot of work to do, the Conservative Party, between now and the next election to win people over. So keep watching this space. We will let you know when we hear anything on the cabinet reshuffle. Right, moving on. The energy giant BP has more than doubled its earnings from the year before. They earned £23 billion in profits after energy prices surged higher because of the war in Ukraine. Shadow's Climate Secretary Ed Miliband is calling on the government to bring forward a proper windfall tax on energy companies after BP announced its biggest yearly profit in history. Howard Cox is the founder of Fair Fuel UK. Good morning, Howard. I've spoken to you several times over the last few months, and when we've been raging about these massive prices that we're paying at the pumps, you and I have both said, let's just wait and see what their profits are like, because I'm sure in the current climate, they won't cream off any profit out of this situation. Oh, guess what? That's exactly what they've done. What's your response?
Well, people are filling up at BP and Shell garages this morning and seeing the headlines will be sickened, because what we're seeing, again, it is profiteering on the basis of no incredible business acumen, no creative marketing, no new product development or new product introduction from these big oil giants. It's simply they control what we pay at the pumps and what we pay in terms of energy around the world. They are ripping and fleecing motorists dry, and it's ridiculous. I'm not a great fan of windfall taxes, but I'm moving towards that direction. But what I would like to see is more on control of how they price fuel, and that's why yesterday I spent a lot of time in Parliament talking to people like Priti Patel, Craig McKinley, Jonathan Gullis and others. We should introduce a thing called Pump Watch, and I've spoken about this to you before.
Yeah. I think it's a great idea. What was the response then at Westminster? What were those very key, influential people saying to you? Do they get it, Howard? Do they understand why people are so angry?
Yes, they do. And I have to say, I was very encouraged. I've got about 46 backbench MPs who've signed letters to Jeremy Hunt and also to Grant Shapps, the business secretary, to say, please, can we get something in place to stop this opportunistic profiteering? And that's the base of it. Since the announcement of Shell and BP, I've had double the amount of emails coming through saying, calling for Pump Watch. It's a funny sort of thing. Looking at their profits, I've done a quick back of a fag packet calculation. If they actually had made 2 billion less profit, we could actually see pump prices down something like 10 to 15p per litre. That's the sort of thing we could do. And the dividend would still be the same for their shareholders.
Well, the BP chief executive, Bernard Looney, says that it is nominative determinism, perhaps, says that it is their plant reliability and the low cost of production that helped them generate strong returns. So, you know, they're just smart businessmen, not loonies at all. We shouldn't be angry at them doing well, apparently.
No, I'm all for profit. I'm just against profiteering. It's a cliche, maybe, but that's the facts of life. But what I do see in the small print of his statement, that this is all going to be invested in green energy. At the moment, we're in a cost of living crisis. People can't afford to heat their homes or fill their cars up, and small businesses. And we've got so many anti-driver legislations going through, what with the ULEZ and the wonderful undemocratic things going on in London at the moment. We need to all come together and get some sense in terms of what we're paying. If we cut fuel duty and if we actually put Pump Watch in place, inflation would rocket downwards and we would have a cost of living crisis much lessened. And that's what we could be doing. And yesterday, the MPs I spoke to were right behind what I said.
Well, that is really encouraging, Howard. Just to explain to people how Pump Watch would work, who would be in control of that? I'm guessing you. I want you in charge of the whole industry, frankly.
Thank you, Bev. Very kind of you. There are several MPs have actually recommended me. Andrea Leadsom, for one, wants me to be the Pump Watch Commissioner, which is quite funny. But no, the way it would work, I'm not a great believer in legislation and controlling of bodies. I mean, Ofgem, Ofcom, Ofwat haven't been a successful set of bodies, have they, with what's happening recently? But what it would work is, what we're asking for is garages, when they go in every morning, is to type in 2 or 3 numbers into a database, which would tell what the current prices they're charging on the forecourts for petrol, diesel and LPG. And that will go to a central database where we could actually build in the oil price changes, local regional variations in terms of cost of real estate of garages, because the cost of a garage in London, in Westminster, is more than something, say, in Cumbria. So there would be certain things. And then we will put a recommended price, what it should be, based on a fair profit levels. Now, we're not talking profit capping or profit control. We're simply making information transparent, fair and honest. And at the moment, if that works, that will be a voluntary scheme. If they don't adhere to this voluntary scheme, then we would move to a full-blown legislative process.
So the UK, the government already introduced this windfall tax, didn't this energy profits levy, to help fund its scheme to lower gas and electricity bills. That's just not working, is it?
No, it's not. And I think what we're not doing is we're not getting to the root cause of the problem. What we're doing is uncontrolled pricing and uncontrolled control of how our energy is priced to the end user, i.e. drivers or people heating their homes and businesses, etc. And even garages, their energy in terms of actually electricity charges have rocketed to deliver petrol being pumped into our cars. Some of them are going up 4 or 5 times, incredible figures. The whole thing has got to be assessed by government. They need to put controls. I'm not a great fan of pricing control or profit control, but I do believe if we make it honest and transparent, then consumers can make a choice of where they go with the people who are being fair and honest.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Howard, when you set up Pump Watch, if you want somebody sat on your board knocking heads together, give me a call. I back everything you're doing 100%. So thank you from everybody watching this who's struggling to fill up their cars at the moment. Keep up the great work. Right, let me know what you think about that. GBViews at gbnews.uk. Makes my blood boil. Now, after the break, a huge earthquake has killed more than 5,000 people now in parts of Syria and Turkey. An international aid effort has been stepped up to help. The pictures are incredibly shocking. We're going to be discussing all of this after the break.
This year on GB News, we've got brand new members in the family.
Join us. Across the entire United Kingdom, we cover the issues that matter to you.
GB News will always stay honest, balanced and fair. We want to hear whatever is on your mind.
And we don't talk down to you.
The establishment had their chance.
Now we're here to represent you.
Britain's watching.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned.
I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online, across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Good morning, welcome back to Bev Turner Today. It is 10:21. I'm delighted this morning to be joined by writer and broadcaster Amy Nicole.
Hello.
Morning, Amy. And former special advisor to Michael Gove, Charlie Rowley. Rowley or Rowley?
Rowley.
Rowley.
I've heard
Okay,
worse.
good.
I've been called a lot worse.
I bet you have. Right, drum roll. We can do a drum roll. We have a new chairman of the Conservative Party, and it is Greg Hands. Tell me about him. I don't know anything about Greg Hands.
Well, this is news that's
Is he a
just come
safe
in.
pair of hands?
He is a
I'm
brilliant
writing the
safe pair of
headlines
hands.
We'll make a
tomorrow
change.
already.
He is a brilliant pair of hands, and he's the best pick for the party. I think he's an ally of Rishi. He's been a minister in the Department for
What does he do at the
Trade.
moment?
So he's a minister in the Department for Trade, which is one of the departments which, along with the reshuffle of moving ministers, we're now seeing a change within the departments, it seems. So 3 departments will emerge by the end of today, as well as a new role for Mr. Hands has just been announced.
So
there he is.
We're looking at a picture of Mr. Hands there. Is that him in his fluorescent jacket? Is that him in a fluorescent coat?
believe-
Well, I mean, look, if
so.
he's an MP that can wear a fluorescent coat and a hard hat, he's in the right job, right?
High vis.
Yeah, and a high vis.
Ready to build back better for the Conservative Party.
Oh,
If we learn anything from Matt Hancock, it's also good in the Conservative Party to be a good pair of hands.
Exactly. Well, Amy.
Sorry.
Well, we're trying to be serious here. This is a new chairman of the Conservative Party. He's got a lot to do, Charlie. He's got to win over got to bring the party together, get rid of the trust backbenchers causing trouble, trust-aligned backbenchers, support Rishi Sunak in what is going to be the toughest couple of years up to the election, if that 18 months. Tell us about him. Do you know what he's like?
Well, he's been a former whip, so he's been the Deputy Chief Whip as well. So he'll know about party discipline. He'll know exactly the sort of, when things are going wrong and people that are currently under investigation for whatever they're being investigated for. He will want to see those quickly.
He's got a lot to keep track of.
It's a bit damning that that's his experience. Well, he's keeping them in line when they're misbehaving.
But he'll know how to do it. And party discipline is absolutely keen. If there's one thing that the Conservative Party does know how to do, it's win elections, but it only wins them when they are united and not divided.
Right.
So he'll bring a lot of expertise in that particular area. As a London MP, he's obviously facing a tough Labour opposition, so he'll know exactly how to take the fight to Labour, something that needs to be replicated right across the country if the Conservative Party are going to hang on to power. So he ticks all the boxes, ministerial experience, has done a lot of media, knows the party from a whip's point of view, and within, as I say, as a local Conservative against a Labour opposition, he'll know exactly what is needed to... and I think as a former business minister, he'll know how to run the party effectively, get business management back in control, get the party up to speed in terms of being that well-oiled machine that it usually is when it comes to election times, and get the party on an election footing to go out and do well in the locals and then hopefully the general election in 2024.
What an excellent sales job from Charlie Rowley there.
We can cross our fingers that all that will come to pass, come to fruition.
Do you think people care, Amy?
No, I think people have lost all faith in the Tory government, and now they're just trying to rake up all they can to try and renew some faith. But I think it's too late. There's too much water under that dirty little bridge.
Well, he has to clear the water from under that dirty little bridge. It's a really, really difficult job, Charlie. He's got... I mean, you know, the whole party has got a heck of a mountain to climb now.
It does, and I think... we can talk about the changes in government, we can talk about the different departments that might emerge, the different people that are going to be in whatever jobs. But the reality is, I think people just want to see delivery. Now, there's a question about whether it's too late. I hope it isn't. I hope Greg will certainly think that it isn't. The Prime Minister certainly doesn't think it's too late. But what people want to see in constituencies across the country is that the Prime Minister, as he set out in the start of this year, delivering on his priorities. So that's dealing with the economy. 3 of those 5 priorities were economically focused, so halving debt, halving inflation, cutting debt, growing the economy, tackling the issues that we see in the NHS with the backlog of cases, and dealing with the small boats crisis, which I know we'll talk about a bit later on. But when people see that delivery, then I think people start to see that restored faith in politics and in the Conservative Party and give him a second chance.
Charlie, is that they need to clean up their own mess?
Well, the economy is something that is global. Impacts have impacted on everybody. So
yeah, we're one under Russia.
Well, there are lots of forecasts, and I know if there was a Conservative member of Parliament sitting here, they would sort of disagree with the IMF. We've got it wrong in the past, but it's all about the future, and it's about seeing what can be delivered and what the Conservatives can do to turn it around.
I like your optimism.
Well, Darren is... I like optimism on this show. We need it most days. We're going to cross live to Westminster to speak to our political editor, Darren McCaffrey, who is there. I only spoke to you a few moments ago, Darren, and this news has broken. Greg Hands, what's your reaction?
Yeah, it looks like he's going to be the next chair of the Conservative Party, someone who's been an MP in West London, actually, since 2005. Actually, has been a trade minister for quite a lot of his ministerial career, but now taking over from Nadhim Zahawi, it seems, as I say, as Conservative Party chairman. Now, this is interesting in the sense that the Conservative Party could do with a chairman, frankly, at the moment, as you guys have just been talking about. They're not doing terribly well in the polls. They're looking at very, very tricky local elections in May, and indeed a very tricky general election next year unless something changes. What is interesting, though, is normally the chairman of the Conservative Party, in effect, is like the CEO, if you like, of the party. He's someone some person to bring in money, donations to the party, and we believe that the finances for the Conservatives is not terribly great at the moment. Someone who G's up the membership, who goes around the country trying to get people to knock on doors and to campaign in those by-elections, etc., but also there's someone that works on the strategy of how to win elections. How does the Conservative Party, as a political entity, try and beat its political foes in different constituencies around the country? Now, Greg Hands, while being a very capable minister, it would be a very, very big change in role. It'll be interesting to see whether he'll be up to the task. It must be said, this role, there's not been many people frantically knocking down the doors to try and take over as chairman of the Conservative Party. If anything, people seem to be taking to Twitter and to all sorts of media to say that they weren't terribly interested in it. So I don't think Rishi Sunak had many choices, frankly, but this is the start of this mini reshuffle we're going to see today. We thought Greg Hans was going to take over. There had been speculation about other names in the frame, but it will be a big job, being no doubt about that, Bev.
Yeah, absolutely. And what is he well liked, Darren? Within, I mean, he's an ex-whip, Charlie was saying, but is he well liked amongst the party and amongst the members and the backbenchers?
Yeah, I think he is. I mean, he's someone who, of course, voted to remain. He was in part of David Cameron's team back in 2016, so kind of part of that government collective responsibility. But yes, he's seen as being a very solid minister. He was demoted, though, it must be said, I think when Theresa May was Prime Minister, out of the cabinet down to being a senior minister rather than around the cabinet table. But yes, I mean, he is seen definitely as a competent minister. There's no doubt about that. I just think, I mean, no matter almost who took over, it's going to be a very, very difficult task to try and change the fortunes of the Conservative Party at the moment. And he frankly doesn't have much time. Those local elections, as I say, are in just a matter of months, the start of May. And that will set the tone, I think, for the next year, depending on how the Conservative Party do. And at the moment, as I say, it's not looking terribly great. And this is part of a kind of wider reshuffle, as I say, that we're seeing within government, Bev. Potential changes to government departments, whether that is in BEIS, the current business department. We're expecting energy actually to be a separate ministry, again, like it was under David Cameron. And in addition to that, potentially a new ministry, if you like, a new department based around science and technology, one of the areas that Rishi Sunak seems to be focused on. And we are expecting those details to drip out. We've already got the first name, it seems now this morning, to drip out in the next couple of hours ahead of the cabinet meeting, the new cabinet meeting, if you like, at 3 o'clock this afternoon.
OK, thanks so much, Darren. Bring us all the news, won't you, as it breaks this morning. Darren McCaffrey there in Westminster. Right, after the break, nurses are taking industrial action again today in an ongoing dispute over pay. I'll have one of the nurses who is not striking after your morning's news. And more from my panel.
It's 10:30. I'm Tamsin Roberts in the GB Newsroom. Here are the headlines. The Prime Minister is expected to announce a mini reshuffle of his cabinet today. Rishi Sunak has to appoint a new Tory party chairman after he sacked Nadeem Zahawi over a breach of the ministerial code last month. The Times newspaper reports the Prime Minister is considering separating the Department for Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy into separate ministries. A cabinet meeting will be held at Number 10 later today. The BBC chairman has denied giving Boris Johnson financial advice before getting the job at the broadcaster. Richard Sharp has appeared for questioning before a cross-panel party of MPs this morning. It's after it was revealed he was involved helping secure Mr Johnson a loan of up to £800,000 before the then Prime Minister backed his appointment to the role at the BBC. His selection is currently under investigation. Eastern Turkey has been struck by a third earthquake measuring 5.7 this morning, as the number of people killed across the country and Syria has risen to more than 5,000. The first 7.8 magnitude quake hit in the early hours of yesterday morning, with the second earthquake measuring 7.5 just a few hours later. Almost 6,000 buildings have been destroyed in the tremor and aftershocks that followed. The World Health Organization says the number of people killed by earthquakes could pass 20,000. International Development Minister Andrew Mitchell told GB News UK search and rescue is expected to arrive today.
The British support, which is very specialist and very technically strong, it will land in daylight today, I hope later this morning, and it will immediately hit the ground running. And I hope that they will be able to save lives, because, as I say, these first 72 hours are when it really counts. Britain supports the White Helmets, which were a civil defence group, but they are actively engaged. We've given them money before, and we will give them money again to support them once we know precisely what their requirements are.
Shadow Climate Secretary Ed Miliband is calling on the government to bring forward a proper windfall tax on energy companies after BP announced its biggest yearly profit in history. The energy giant has more than doubled its earnings from the year before, earning £23 billion in profits in 2022, after energy prices surged due to the war in Ukraine. BP Chief Executive Bernard Looney says stronger plant reliability and a lower cost of production helped with profits. TV, online and DAB+ radio. This is GB News.
He's the king of breakfast TV and he's back. Eamon Holmes, back on the TV
Surprised
with me this morning.
Even remember my name.
I know, it's been 4 months. You have holy water by your bed?
Oh, yes. Already to bless.
Oh, Eamon. Oh.
Why do you not believe anything I say?
Eamon Holmes back on GB News Breakfast at 6 a.m.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even some ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Clip that bit up.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions are, those days are gone, I can tell you.
She's only teasing. Go on.
He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Jubes and Kerr. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
The guy went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions. I have no time for cultural totalitarianism. We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. Welcome back to Bev Turner Today on GB News TV and DAB Radio. Thank you for joining me. You've been getting in touch about the cabinet reshuffle. We've just heard that Greg Hands is the new chairman of the Conservative Party. Nicholas says to date, for all parties, you just enter the choice's name, followed by the word scandal into any web search engine, and voila. And more departments. This is the creation of a new Department of Science, Innovation and Technology that we heard about from Darren. More departments means more ministers and junior ministers, plus more civil servants and a lot more money. And Carol says, let's hope he gets rid of Jeremy Hunt. I have no confidence in him at all. They will never win the next election with him as Chancellor. The only bit of kind of memorable history of Greg Hands, I was racking my brains, was that he resigned over the plan to expand the Heathrow third runway. He opposed Heathrow's third runway in 2018 and he resigned, but then Boris Johnson returned him to Trade Policy Minister, and then he was promoted to Business, Energy and Clean Growth Minister. So, let me know what you think about that. Right, today nurses are taking industrial action again in an ongoing dispute over pay. This comes as yesterday saw the largest strike in NHS history, with members of the Royal College of Nursing, GMB and Unite paramedics and ambulance workers walking out. So joining me now is one nurse who voted against the strikes, a psychiatric nurse, Julia Taylor. Good morning, Julia. Good to see you again. I was really hoping... Don't take this personally, but I was hoping I wasn't going to have to talk to you again, because I was hoping the strikes would have come to an end. But here we are. How are you feeling about it now as these strikes drag on with no sign of a resolution in sight?
I just don't think the strikes are going to work. I said that from the very beginning. All that's going to happen is we're going to end up looking greedy, and it's not just about pay. And I still don't think we should strike, although I do support the nurses that do strike. I can't do it. I just can't bring myself to do it. But it's so difficult working in the NHS right now. It's so hard. And I know that Pat Cullen said that they'll reduce the demand to 10%. But then, to me, that just does make it about pay. And it's not about pay. It's about attracting people to the actual NHS to work as a nurse. We've got 50,000 nurses shortage, and the pay isn't as good as it used to be. When I started my job a long time ago, I got 20% more in real terms pay. And people are now saying, well, you knew what you were going into, you knew it was badly paid. But I didn't then. And a lot of nurses are leaving. But I still don't think we should strike. I think we should do a mass protest. You know, like what they did in Paris recently because of the pensions. And there was hundreds of thousands of people. That really hit home for Macron. Why can't we do something like that instead of going on strike? Because sadly, the patients are going to suffer more. They're already suffering now. And that's why they're going on strike, because we haven't got the staff, we haven't got the resources, and people are, I mean, the waiting list it's nearly 8 million. I mean, I know we've had the pandemic and such like, but prior to the pandemic, it was already 2 million anyway, the waiting list. But it was getting bad. And I would say over the last 10 years, we've been trying so hard to get the government to listen. And I mean, saying that nurses should do a degree now and now you'll not get a bursary. £60,000 worth of debt to come and be a nurse and then pay for your parking and then work in conditions where there's no staff. What's the incentive?
Julia, what's it like for you on the days when your colleagues are on strike, out on the picket line, and you're still there on the psychiatric ward working? Is it tougher on those days because you're so sort of short-staffed, more than usual?
Well, to be honest with you, the trust I work for voted not to strike. Only 30% of people voted to strike. So I can't answer that question. But I do know some of my friends, you know, I know a lot of nurses, obviously. It's very difficult because they're kind of looked on as a bit of, you remember the scabs in the 1980s and then the strikes with the coal miners. Yeah, it's kind of, you know, looked upon like that. And some of my colleagues, because I voted not to strike and they voted to strike, they still can't get over the fact that I said I wouldn't strike. But it's not going to work, and it's going to make us look greedy. But it's not just about pay, and it's very important that I get that message out. It's about the conditions we work in, because we're short-staffed, because there aren't enough nurses and there's not enough beds, and there's reduced personnel on the floor. It's really difficult, and I've actually had some experience myself on the other side of the fence recently. My father sadly died last Monday, but prior to that, Oh, thank you. Prior to that, he was diagnosed with motor neuron disease, but he's actually had it since 2015. And because there's not enough nurses, nobody knew about it until 8 weeks before he passed away. And that was quite frustrating because I knew there was something wrong. And I kept asking and asking, and the appointments were miles ahead and miles ahead. He ended up in hospital. And I mean, the poor nurses, they were run off their feet. On one day, there was 2 nurses had to come from another hospital to help on the ward to make sure that the patients got the care that they needed. And that's the kind of thing that's happening. When you're getting moved as a nurse to an area that you're unfamiliar with, it's quite a horrible feeling, you know, because you don't know what the routine is, you don't know what medication they're on, everything's different to what you know, and it's very stressful, and you have no choice.
I know, it's really hard. It's really hard. Julia, thank you for joining us again. Thank you for all your hard work. And I'm really sorry to hear about your dad and that experience. That's really rough. A lot of people will relate to it at the moment. Psychiatric nurse Julia Taylor there. Thanks, Julia. Let me know your thoughts on what you've just heard then as well. Are your sympathies running thin for the nurses? Particularly if you've got somebody in hospital. It can be really hard to sympathise. Now, moving on. Tonight, Wrexham go up against Sheffield United in their 4th round FA Cup replay, with a tie against Tottenham Hotspur up for grabs. Now, you are still watching the same channel. This isn't a sports broadcast, so bear with me. But this week marks 2 years since the Hollywood actors Ryan Reynolds and Rob McElhenney bought the North West Football Club. In that time, Wrexham has gained city status as well as being the star of its own documentary. Our reporter, Jack Carson, has more.
It's almost 2 years since 2 stars of Hollywood bought one Welsh football club. Now Wrexham are facing the prospect of playing Premier League Tottenham Hotspur if they can beat Sheffield United in tonight's FA Cup replay. as well as huge investment and improvement on the pitch. Off it, the partnership of Ryan Reynolds and Rob McElhenney is putting Wrexham firmly back on the map. I met up with Wrexham AFC superfan Kevin Jones, who describes the change in the atmosphere around the city.
Well, we're getting 10,000 fans a week. We're taking 4,500 to Coventry, like this Tuesday, 5,000 fans going to Sheffield United. It's just bringing more and more support to the club. Now the kids, it's all Wrexham, 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 and it's the town's just buzzing. It's absolutely buzzing. Like the impact on, financially for the whole town, it's starting to brighten up a little bit. So we do need more shops coming in and things like that, which hopefully it does.
But more support can also cause more issues. This McDonald's in the town centre behind me has started playing classical music on a match day to try and calm down fans. Away from the football, global exposure has proved good for business. Billion-pound property firm FI Real Estate Management have increased their investment into the area since the football club was taken over.
What they've done is just supercharged the entire area, and it's been a real, good look factor, a good feel factor. And if you look at what the local authorities doing by way of regeneration and the rest of it, of course it made us just, want to buy more land. We bought 46 acres. We've actually just recently bought another 47 acres. So we've got huge plans there. And if you look at the plans we've got, it's 1,800,000 square feet of new build. That effectively is another £140 million worth of investment on top of what we've already invested.
Looking forward, local MP Sarah Atherton hopes to win financial support for the city from round 3 of the government's Levelling Up Fund.
We unfortunately did not get it this time round. I'm a little miffed with the government for not doing that, because Wrexham really needs this bid. We need to level up sport in North Wales. The Gateway bid is more than just a stadium. It's about the whole entry into Wrexham. We need to get that over the line. We need to get that built so people, when they come into Wrexham, can see that we are optimistic, we're aspiring, we're going forth, we're looking forward whilst holding on to our heritage and our background. But, we're Wrexham and we're here to stay.
Hollywood seems to have secured Wrexham's stability for years to come. But tonight, their ticket to an FA Cup 5th round tie against Spurs still needs to be secured. Lights, camera, action Wrexham. Jack Carson, GB News.
That was a great package, Jack Carson. But Amy and I have only one complaint. There were not enough pictures of Ryan Reynolds in that video, were there, Amy?
Never. There's no
There can't be such a thing as enough pictures of Ryan Reynolds.
Exactly.
That was the only reason I really wanted to watch that package. He's perfect. I love him. Do you like him, Charlie?
Well, you'll have to put up with me now.
You are not that dissimilar.
I'm sorry to disappoint you.
Sorry, you're not that dissimilar. On a Venn diagram, you've got various features.
With the lights off. Probably.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, I think it's such an interesting story, isn't it? I'm not bothered about football, but I would quite like to watch that match this evening. Now, awful story. You will have woken up this morning to more devastating pictures of the earthquake. It's killed more than 5,000 people now on the border of Turkey and Syria. The latest on this, Amy, more shocks this morning. 5.8 magnitude quake struck at a depth of 1.2 miles. It puts our problems into perspective, doesn't it, when you see a story like this?
Totally, and especially after 11 years of civil war in Syria and now this. And the other devastating thing is that they're even struggling to get aid to the people who need it because it's damaged so much of the infrastructure, the roads, that also the humanitarian work has been stalled in that way as well. It's just my heart goes out to them, really.
It's really terrible. I mean, we're seeing some of the images here of entire buildings just collapsing to the ground, Charlie. It's extraordinary, isn't it?
Yeah, very, very moving images, as you say, that we're seeing now. And I think, as Amy's right to point out, that it's very, very difficult to get aid into, particularly Syria, where there's only one, in the northern province, there's only one access area that is available. Yeah. The International Development Secretary, Andrew Mitchell, this morning was very good to outline what help is being given. And it is just awful because Turkey, in particular, is such a densely populated area that these impacts is why the impact of this earthquake has impacted on so many people, because of the, as I say, the densely populated area. And the weather conditions are making it even more difficult for people to get aid into A, Turkey, and B, then to the areas that need it the most.
And the numbers are shocking, isn't it? We know there's more than 5,000 dead now, and no doubt that number will increase. At least 5,000 people trapped, scores more under the rubble. Depth of 1.2 miles was the quake in central Turkey. 8,000 people have so far been rescued, more than 5,000 buildings destroyed, and again, that will increase. Just absolutely mind-boggling. Closer to home now. Boris Johnson continues to be a thorn in the side of Rishi Sunak, and he is urging the Prime Minister to forge ahead with the controversial plan to deport migrants to Rwanda. Amy Nichols, go.
Well, not only is this completely impractical and massively expensive, but it also doesn't make logical sense for Boris Johnson to suggest that Rwanda, people have no idea about Rwanda, he said. They're wholly wrong to condescend and disparage Rwanda in the way that they do. Well, I'll give you some ideas about Rwanda. They murder their political opponents, people go missing, they have very limited women's rights, they torture people in detention, and the key here is that there is no access to fair trials in many, many cases. And the reason this is worrying is because when people go to Rwanda, there would be innocent people that haven't been processed yet, so they would be processed, in theory, in Rwanda, a place where fair trial is not always possible, hardly ever possible. So it's really worrying because we're going to be deporting potentially innocent people before they go to trial, and they will probably end up not having a fair trial based on the history of this country.
Well, what Boris Johnson would say to you, he said that those who oppose the UK-Rwanda migration partnership have no idea about Rwanda, have probably never been there, are wholly wrong to condescend and disparage the country in the way that they do. I mean, they are one of the digital hubs for the fourth industrial revolution. They have had a lot of money put into them by the World Economic Forum to make them a centre for industrial and technological development. It's not all bad, is it, Charlie?
I think that's right, and I think there is a separation of the Rwandan legal system. And yes, there are cases that we've heard in Rwanda that are less than comfortable viewing, particularly amongst the Rwandan government. But this is about the UK government and its operations in Rwanda. So it is perfectly legitimate that anybody that comes into this country illegally, not for refuge or not seeking refuge or asylum, that has no real right to be here and no real reason to be here, that they will be deported to Rwanda. It'll be overseen by UK officials, that processing that takes place out there. And of course, if you do have a right to asylum, then of course the whole point of the plan is to increase the number of people that are doing the processing, increasing the patrols that take place in the channel to prevent people in the first place. So you do end up with
a very, go. You've just said it. It's to prevent people. It's to be a deterrent. So if it's a deterrent, then how can you then say, but they'll have a fabulous life in Rwanda? And at the moment, 200 children went missing from the hotels that we're currently housing the migrants in. And one of the reasons that people,
in the UK.
People believed that this was happening is because people were saying to the children, if you stay here, they're going to send you to Rwanda. So it's being actively used as a ploy by human trafficking gangs within the UK to get people to leave the hotels. So well, it doesn't. The link doesn't exist for me that Rwanda's great, but it's a deterrent.
So the deterrent that I was talking about was the patrols that take place in the Channel. So that would be UK Border Force. The deterrent is also the work that we're doing with France to make sure that people don't take that crossing in the first place. But the actual processing of people that do enter this country illegally, that don't have right or don't seek refuge or don't have right to be here, seeking refuge here, will be deported to Rwanda, and their claim will be processed out there.
But isn't this the point, that it's a deterrent, not because it's a terrible country to go and live in, but that it isn't Great Britain, and that's where a lot of the migrants want to be?
I think that when Boris Johnson said here, we have a plan and Labour don't, that's actually incorrect, because the correct plan here is to address the push of why these people are coming here and give them the dignity that they deserve. So Labour's plan would be to create safe routes for people, which the Conservative government have systematically closed off over the last 10 years. And Charlie, you can't disagree with that. So at the moment, there's a vast swathe of people who just don't have the ability to apply for a safe asylum here. And that's the problem.
If we leave the European Convention on Human Rights in order to make it easier to conduct these deportations to Rwanda, what does the UK look like to you in your eyes if we're no longer in the ECHR?
So for me, it always comes back to the fact that the ECHR was created after World War II to stop any anti-democratic goings-on in Europe. And I think, what message does that send if we cannot stay within the European Court of Human Rights? What does that say about us as a people?
Well, I suppose it says we can determine our own human rights. We don't have to be a part of the European Convention on that, Charlie.
Yes, some might say that, and they do. Look, I personally wouldn't, at this stage, leave the ECHL. I think people voted to leave this country. We've left the European Union. We've left all legal stature, as far as I can see it. We make our own laws in this country. I think that's enough, and I think that's fine. But I think, look, people will see, actually, in this country how generous the UK has been when it comes to people seeking asylum and the refuge system. We've been very, very right to open our hearts and our homes to the people of Ukraine that are suffering. There was the same with the Afghanistan scheme. There's the same with the Syrian
scheme. What have we just done with the Afghans?
So it is perfectly right to say that, actually, when it comes to people seeking refuge and people that need to seek asylum, that the UK is number one and front and centre, leading the international league tables. I think they're to help people, which is the right thing to do. But when it comes to people that fundamentally do not have a right to be in this country and are taking that illegal crossing, that they are deported to Rwanda and not welcome in this country.
So what would you say, why do these people not have the right to claim asylum here when 86% of them were found to have genuine refugee status when they were finally processed? And when you say...
That seems high. I think particularly the Albanians don't end up 86% of them aren't allowed to stay?
Well, the majority of them have been found. And when there was that tragic incident recently where the boat actually sank, they were a mixture of Syrians, Afghans, Iraqis. I think this notion that these are all economic migrants is not the case at all. Well, I know it is not the case at all. And I know that we're 19th per capita in Europe for taking refugees. We do not take our fair share. It is incorrect to suggest that we do.
Well, I mean, look, we've got... How much are we spending taxpayers' money? I think it's about £5 million a day at the last estimate on putting people up into hotels. I'm not OK with that.
I'm not OK with that. But you need to process the people, find out who they are, give them the right to stay and work and contribute to our society.
How do you find out who they are, though, if they bring no documentation?
Well, you absolutely start with processing more than 4% to maybe get an idea of who they are.
Is the will there to push through these application process quicker?
Oh, totally, and that's why I think I said at the start there's going to be an increase in the number of the people that take part in that processing of individuals. It is the case that, as you rightly said, Bev, that I think a large majority of the people that are actually coming into this country legally are young. I say young, they're in their 30s, that's me too, but, are young Albanian men. Now, they are economic migrants or seeking to chance their arm to come into this country. Of course, if you are a vulnerable, young, unaccompanied minor, then of course the UK will obviously look after you.
But they're not looking
after. Thousands have gone missing, haven't they? That's part of the problem.
Well, that is a problem, and that is something that the Home Office absolutely needs to look into and rectify. But the point remains that if you come into this country seeking refuge, you will be processed properly and fairly. If you don't have a right to be in this country, you will be deported, and that's the right thing to do.
It's simply not
we've got to move on. End of our first hour, guys. OK, former advisor to UK Secretary of State for International Trade, Shankar Singham, will be giving me his thoughts on today's cabinet reshuffle, and Liz Truss saying that she does not want to stand 4 p.m. again. See you in a few minutes.
Hello, I'm Alex Deakin, and this is your latest weather update from the Met Office. Sparkling winter sunshine for many. Quite a bit of cloud across parts of the north, and a little bit of light rain and drizzle across parts of southern Scotland. That's from this weather front, but it's weakening all the time as it bumps up against this area of high pressure. Another one will arrive during tomorrow, and the isobar squeezing together. That's going to bring some strong winds across parts of Scotland. The one today, though, is bringing a bit more cloud and a little bit of light rain and drizzle here and there across the east of Northern Ireland, southwest Scotland. Sunny spells in the far northwest, but it is turning breezy here. For England and Wales, it's been a foggy start. That fog is taking a while to clear away, but revealing plenty of sunshine for most this afternoon. Temperatures about average, generally 8-9 degrees, but 10 or 11 across parts of northeast England and eastern Scotland, so quite mild here. It'll turn pretty cold pretty quickly again this evening across the south. The frost taking hold rapidly, and then the fog will thicken up once more overnight. Some dense patches of fog, which will again be around for tomorrow morning's rush hour. Cloud increasing across Scotland and Northern Ireland, so again, not as cold, not as frosty here, whereas in the south, -5, -6 in rural spots. Another sunny one once that fog has cleared, but it will be around for the morning rush hour, and then the wind's really picking up during the course of Wednesday across the far northwest. Some rain coming in here later, but the wind's the greatest cause for concern. That could cause some disruption, certainly some travel issues with ferries being affected and some of the bridges here as well. Most places again having a dry day, a sunny one in the south once that fog has cleared, more cloud further north. We will see this rain sweeping in as we go through Wednesday evening across the parts of Scotland, Northern Ireland, followed by a little bit of snow over the hills, pushing into northern England. But again, as it pushes southwards, that rain will tend to fizzle out. And the outlook is generally dry, fairly cloudy over the course of the second half of the week and slowly turning milder.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me. So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi, Andrew Pierce here. Join me every Friday lunchtime for a proper no-nonsense debrief of the week's events. With special guests in the studio and the GB News team on the ground, I'll be getting you up to date with news, some intelligent discussion and my own sharp take. The weekend starts here with me every Friday lunchtime on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512.
Virgin Media Channel 604.
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview Channel 236. And YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good morning, welcome back to Bev Turner today on GB News. Before midday, we're going to be getting to the bottom of yet another cabinet reshuffle with Rishi Sunak appointing a new Tory party chairman. We're also going to look at how much support is being offered to families of missing people, as today marks 11 days since the mother of two, Nicola Bulley, went missing. That's all coming up after a look at the latest news.
Good morning, I'm Tamsin Roberts in the GB newsroom. It's 1 minute past 11. The Prime Minister is expected to announce a mini reshuffle of his cabinet today. Rishi Sunak has to appoint a new Tory party chairman after he sacked Nadhim Zahawi over a breach of the ministerial code last month. The Times newspaper reports the Prime Minister is considering separating the Department for Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy into separate ministries. A cabinet meeting will be held at Number 10 later today. Eastern Turkey has been struck by a third earthquake, measuring 5.7 this morning, as the number of people killed across the country and Syria has risen to more than 5,000. The first 7.8 magnitude quake hit in the early hours of yesterday morning, with the second major earthquake measuring 7.5 just a few hours later. Almost 6,000 buildings have been destroyed in the tremor and aftershocks that followed. Rescuers continue to dig through the rubble in search of survivors. The World Health Organization says the number of people killed could pass 20,000. International Development Minister Andrew Mitchell told GB News UK search and rescue is expected to arrive in the country today.
The British support, which is very specialist and very technically strong, it will land in daylight today, I hope later this morning, and it will immediately hit the ground running. And I hope that they will be able to save lives, because as I say, these first 72 hours are when it really counts. Britain supports the White Helmets, which were a civil defence group, but they are actively engaged. We've given them money before, and we will give them money again to support them once we know precisely what their requirements are.
Journalist Iona Sakoufakis told GB News about the rescue efforts in the Turkish town of Adana.
Adana, this city is one of the most affected ones. It's one of the 10 most affected cities in Turkey. Right now, if you can see behind me, right a second ago, they actually found someone. The teams here that just managed to get someone out. And they're just taking him to the ambulance.
An underwater search for missing mother Nicola Bully is still underway in the River Wyre. It's been 11 days since Miss Bully went missing after taking her dog for a walk in St Michael's on Wyre in Lancashire. The search follows a fresh appeal by her partner, who said her 2 daughters desperately miss her and need her back. Forensic search specialist Peter Folding says they need to rule everything out.
Somebody could have put the phone on the bench. Somebody could have found it and put it on the bench, just on the nearest bench. We don't know. Nobody knows. This is a complete mystery, this whole thing. And normally, if somebody falls in the water, if Nicola went in here, her body would have gone straight to the bottom. It would remain there, and police divers would have found her that day.
The BBC chairman has denied giving Boris Johnson financial advice before getting the job at the broadcaster, calling their relationship broadly professional. Richard Sharp has appeared for questioning before a cross-party panel of MPs this morning. It's after it was revealed he was involved in helping secure Mr Johnson a loan of up to £800,000 before the then Prime Minister backed his appointment to the role at the BBC. His selection is under investigation. Shadow Climate Secretary Ed Miliband is calling on the government to bring forward a proper windfall tax on energy companies after BP announced its biggest yearly profit in history. The energy giant has more than doubled its earnings from the year before, earning £23 billion in profits in 2022 after energy prices surged due to the war in Ukraine. BP Chief Executive Bernard Looney says stronger plant reliability and a lower cost of production helped with profits. The Shadow Defence Secretary is to argue cuts to the British Army must be halted to show the UK is a leading European member in NATO. In a speech at the Royal United Services Institute today, John Healey will outline Labour's plans to ensure the UK's duty to the alliance are fulfilled in full. It follows Defence Secretary Ben Wallace conceding the armed forces had been hollowed out and underfunded. Nurses are staging industrial action again today in an ongoing dispute over pay. It follows what was called the biggest strike in NHS history yesterday, with nurses, paramedics and ambulance workers walking out. Members from the Royal College of Nursing, as well as GMB and Unite unions, are taking part. Health leaders have described this week as incredibly disrupted. Unions have urged ministers in England to offer a new pay deal to prevent further action, but ministers say they want to look forward to next year's pay. And some breaking news that we've just been receiving in the last few minutes. The government has announced the new names in the cabinet reshuffle, with Greg Hands appointed the new Conservative Party chairman. Grant Shapps has been appointed Secretary of State for Energy Security, and Kemi Badenoch has been appointed as Secretary of State for Business and Trade. So those updates we're just hearing for you now. We will, of course, have more on this for you shortly. That's all for me for now. Back to Bev.
very good morning. Welcome back to Bev Turner today on GB News. If you're just joining us, where have you been? But fear not, there is still lots to come. Prime Minister Rishi Sunak has just finished shuffling his cabinet. 4 new departments and a host of new appointments. Stay right here to find out who has got the top jobs and, more importantly, why. Will this be enough to save the Tory party? Let me know. GBviews at gbnews.uk. And as today marks 11 sad days since Nicola Bulley has gone missing, we're looking at the wider problem of missing people. You won't believe how many people actually go missing in the UK every year. We're going to be finding out a little bit about that and how it might be for the family at this time. And I'm going to be joined by the former advisor to Michael Gove, Charlie Rowley, and the author Amy Nickel for some of the day's top stories. And of course, you are my third panellist. Do get in touch. Email me, gbviews at gbnews.uk, or tweet me at gbnews to have your say. So it's a big day in politics. The Prime Minister has announced his cabinet reshuffle in the last couple of minutes. Let's cross over live now to Westminster and speak to Darren McCaffrey. Good morning, Darren. What else have we heard in the last few moments?
Well, we've all had it in one go, if you like. Downing Street, in the last couple of minutes, issued a statement with details of those new departments and indeed the ministers that will lead them up. Let me talk you through them. First of all, Grant Shapps moves from the business department that no longer exists to a new department, the Secretary of State for Energy Security and Net Zero, a reflection, I think, there of clearly the situation the UK finds itself in terms of energy prices and a reliance particularly on foreign gas. So energy security part of that, but so too net zero. Rishi Sunak making it clear that he's determined to meet that commitment of being net zero by the middle of this century. Michelle Donnellan is now the Secretary of State for Science, Innovation and Technology. Again, a new government department. Clearly, the Prime Minister has talked in the past about trying to make the UK a science superpower. This is an effort to do so, to have a ministry effectively devoted to that. Kemi Badenoch, who was the Trade Minister, effectively remains in that post, but consumed also in that new department is business. So she will be Secretary of State for Business and Trade. She remains President of the Board of Trade and also the Minister for Women and Equality. So effectively, her remit to a large degree has increased, if you like. Lucy Fraser will be the Secretary of State now for Culture, Media and Sport. That's the old DCMS department, if you like, that Michelle Donnellan had been in. And Greg Hands, we talked about this last hour, is the new Conservative Party chair, and what an uphill struggle he has to try and get the Conservative Party on a firm footing going into those local elections a little later on this year, and almost certainly a general election next year, at a time in which the party, of course, is in a pretty terrible position in the polls, in which members seem frankly quite depressed about where they're at, and where there's an awful lot of division and a lack of money for the Conservative Party. So that's the mini reshuffle. It seems to have gone pretty smoothly, it must be said, for Rishi Sunak this morning. Many will ask, what difference is this all going to make, Bev? You know, changing government departments, moving certain bits around, is it really going to fundamentally change much? I think what Rishi Sunak's trying to do here is send a signal about his priorities beyond the 5 he's announced at the start of the year, whether that's on energy security or whether it's on science. But in the end, there will be criticism that this is essentially just trying to reorganise some deck chairs on the decks, while not actually really fundamentally probably going to change the Conservative Party or the government's electoral performance.
Let's get more now from my panellists this morning, but you've been promoted, Charlie Rowley.
Thank
you.
You
Thought, well, you're
Thank
in the
you.
building, you're the expert on this. That was lucky, wasn't it?
Yeah, perfect timing.
Any standout appointments there that surprise you or that you think look like a really good fit?
A couple of things, actually, and I thought what Darren was just saying is right on the money. The first thing is Kemi Badenoch, I would see as a slight promotion.
Yes.
The Department for Business merges with the Department for International Trade, so she has assumed the business brief as well as international trade. I think that's a good move because you now have an economic department, the Treasury setting out its economic growth forecast and what it does for government spending as a whole.
Yeah.
But also having a real department now that is going to be looking at growing businesses as well as getting inward investment into the country. It is an increase in the powers there.
Yeah. They've also given her a little bit of a side job, haven't they? They've made a Minister for Women and Equalities.
Yes, it's it's a role that I think she's had previously, and it's that role in particular that seems to get shuffled around, whether it's in the Cabinet Office at the centre, but she's maintained that there.
There's some people who say, though, oh, we'll just give her the bit about the women, just give her the women's bit as well. That's not very important, but...
Well, she's been very hard. You know, she's a tough talker, and she goes down very well with the Conservative grassroots because of her stance, particularly on equalities, and she's very well liked. The only other standout, I think, a couple of things, is Lucy Fraser becoming the new Secretary of State. That's a promotion. I think I'm right in saying, although somebody will correct me, I'm sure there's plenty of people that have got access to more technology than I have.
Our viewers are very good at correcting people.
I think she's very currently sitting in the Department for Levelling Up, the department I was formerly in, and I think she might have been the Housing Minister, so we might need another... Lucy Fraser. So we may need another Housing Minister, and that is something that housing and planning is something that's hugely important to backbench Tory MPs in particular, getting those planning reforms absolutely right, where there might be some NIMBYism in the past, but we need more homes in this country, so that'll be one to watch. But I could be totally wrong on that.
Well, we'll find out.
I'm sure that's where she currently is.
One of my minions in the back office to be looking into that as we speak, Charlie.
Exactly, and thank you. And of course, the department that she now takes over as Culture, Media and Sport, it used to be the Department for Digital Culture, Media and Sport. We can maybe assuming that digital finds itself into Michelle Donnellan's new department, who was the former Secretary of State for Culture, Media and Sport, in Science, Innovation and Technology.
Maybe the word digital is just old-fashioned now.
We've ditched digital.
We've ditched the digital. Well, we very much haven't, because they've started this new department, as you say, for Science, Innovation and Technology. Rishi Sunak is at heart a technocrat. He will be loving this. He loves his AI, doesn't he? He loves the technological move towards the future. So that, in a way, is not really a surprise that we've got that new department. One of our viewers got in touch to say, you know, more departments, more civil servants, more money, more tax. But I have to say, looking at these, they seem quite smart decisions as a layperson looking at this.
Exactly, and I think you're absolutely right. These new departments, the way that they're now set up, it reflects Rishi's priorities. And Grant Shapps just finally going to the Department for Energy Security and Net Zero. That's something that I know a lot of people have a lot of views about, racing to net zero. But it shows the ambition of the Conservative Party to, be a compassionate Conservative Party that takes the tough decisions on the economy, on migration, but is also committed to net zero and making sure that we have new technology in place to make sure that we are more energy efficient and we have the energy sustainability in this country, and we're not reliant on places like Russia because of all the crises that we've seen in response to energy prices in Ukraine.
It is controversial, though, the Net Zero Agenda 30. It is controversial, and Grant Shapps is going to have some quite difficult conversations, isn't he? And also a lot of pressure from the fossil fuel industry.
Exactly so, and I think, the reason why it's potent that Grant is in that role is because he's a brilliant media performer. We've seen him when he was at the Department for Transport having tough negotiations with the transport unions. He's going to have to go out and sell net zero for all of the benefits that it provides, and that's not just insulating homes, but it's investing in new technology to make sure we're as clean a, greener country as we possibly can be, in order to get bills down and in order to make sure that we're not as energy reliant as we have been in the past on places like Russia.
OK, right, thanks, Charlie. Don't go anywhere. You're going to be back talking about the other stories of the day, in just a moment with Amy. But joining me now for more on this is the international trade expert and government advisor, Shankar Singham. Good morning, Shankar. Great to see you this morning. What do you think? I know it's only broken in the last few moments. You may not have had an awful lot of time to look at the changes, but in terms of the Conservative Party and moving it forward, do these look like positive and possibly popular decisions?
Yeah, I think clearly energy is a huge issue, and breaking it out of a broader department and the focus on energy security and net zero. I mean, sometimes they don't always necessarily, go together very consistently, but the idea of energy security, lowering the cost of energy policy, regulatory changes that are necessary to make the energy market work more efficiently and better, I think that's very important. So I think that's quite a good focus. I think the Science and Technology department is sort of recognising that data, in a sense, data is almost a new currency. I mean, the data flow, data movement is incredibly important, and it really is about business and regulation. It's not a sort of add-on to a media and culture ministry. So I think that makes sense. The interesting one, I think, in terms of how it plays out, is going to be business and the trade department merged. We've really gone back to the old Department of Trade and Industry, in a sense. But there will be some cultural issues there, because typically DIT has been very open, liberalising type department. commerce ministries around the world, generally business ministries around the world, tend to favour incumbents. They tend to be a little bit more protectionist. So there will be a little bit of a cultural battle there. But because Kemi Badenoch is the Secretary of State for the whole department, and she was the DIT Secretary of State, I suspect she'll drive a liberalising agenda. One hopes that she will drive a liberalising agenda through the whole department. So I think, broadly speaking, these are sensible moves, and they prioritise, I think, what needs to be prioritised.
I can't have you here, Shankar, without asking you to reflect a bit on what Liz Truss wrote in the papers on Sunday with her enormous 4,000-word article, with her explanation as to why she didn't stay in number 10 for longer, and she blamed an entrenched culture that she had underestimated when it came to how to run the economy. What are your thoughts on her take on events that she depicted in the paper?
Well, I mean, first of all, I think it is important that she sets out, her take on what happened, and I think it is very important that the ideas that she tried to push in government, which essentially are not particularly controversial ideas. I mean, the ideas of open trade, of pro-competitive regulation, of making markets more efficient, of property rights protection and low taxes, these are not controversial ideas, and it would be a terrific shame, I think, if the result of all of this was that those ideas lost their, these are the ideas that, frankly, have lifted hundreds of millions of people in the world out of poverty and created enormous amounts of prosperity around the world, and we shouldn't lose sight of that. And I think that's one thing that I think she wanted to set out. I think if she's guilty of anything, it's certainly of underestimating the entrenched incumbent interests that are out there. I mean, for example, the market that sort of caused the sort of initial crisis, the LDI market. My fear is that there are lots of financial service product markets out there which have relied for far too long on artificially low interest rates and sort of artificially cheap money, and there's quite a lot of moral hazard in the system. In other words, people doing things that are risky that they wouldn't do if it was a sort of market interest rate, if you will. But with an artificially low cost of money, they do it. And this unwound the LDI market, and that's what caused a lot of problems for her in particular. But there's a lot of blame to go around there, and I do hope that there will be some sort of investigation of the role, that the Bank of England played, that the regulators played in this market in the run-up to, because this has been building for some time, and I hope we can learn some lessons from what actually happened in the LDI market to apply to others, because interest rates are going to be higher than they were. They have to be, because we're dealing with these inflationary pressures, and that is going to cause some effects in a lot of these markets. And it is imperative that we deal with distortions. Part of what Liz Truss was trying to achieve, I think, is a market in the UK that is less distorted than it currently is. And
do you think, Shankar, just sorry to interrupt you, but I want to ask you, do you think interest rates have peaked now, or do you think they're going to go up even further?
I don't think they will go up necessarily. A lot of this depends on the inflationary environment that we're in and how the Bank of England reacts to that inflationary environment, and also how the Federal Reserve in the US does with an inflationary environment in the US. So I don't think we know the answer to that yet. Right. But I mean, I think one of the problems that people have with interest rates going up is their mortgages. I mean, I think, in other countries, people have the ability to have fixed rate mortgages for the lifetime of the mortgage. And I think one of the things that, Truss's premiership, was trying to challenge people to do is to ask, why don't we have that in the UK? Why do I have to fix for a, specific period of time and then I have to float? When in other countries, you don't have to do that.
And one last question, if I may, just one last question. What do you think about these massive profits that these energy companies have announced this week, BP and Shell, over £30 billion, when people are struggling to pay their fuel bills at the moment?
Well, I mean, generally, I know that there is a big push for windfall profits taxes and so forth. But what people don't always see is that there is a cycle here, and there is an enormous amount of investment that these companies have to make in infrastructure and plant in development that actually doesn't yield anything. And the oil price can be very, very low for long periods of time. So they have to deal with that fluctuating cycle. So I don't think it's a good instinct that the moment we see the higher price and the resultant profitability, we then attack the profitability by sort of demanding these. I mean, they're already paying a 75% windfall profits tax, so it's already quite high. I mean, I don't think there's a need to do more. Now, the only caveat I would make to that is if that profit is arising from a distortion of the market in favour of those companies, for example, if they're subsidised or something like that, then I think it's a different question. Then I think there's a legitimate argument for that kind of practice. But I don't think that's what's happening here.
OK. All right. Thank you so much, Shankar Singham there. Now, after this short break, we are going to be talking, my panel are going to be back here. We're going to be looking at the biggest news stories of the day, including talking about the shocking number of dog bites which hospitalise Britons every year. Don't go anywhere, you want to watch that.
Hello, I'm Alex Deakin, and this is your latest weather update from the Met Office. Sparkling winter sunshine for many. Quite a bit of cloud across parts of the north, and a little bit of light rain and drizzle across parts of southern Scotland. That's from this weather front, but it's weakening all the time as it bumps up against this area of high pressure. Another one will arrive during tomorrow, and the isobars squeezing together. That's going to bring some strong winds across parts of Scotland. The one today, though, is bringing a bit more cloud and a little bit of light rain and drizzle here and there across the east of Northern Ireland, southwest Scotland. Sunny spells in the far northwest, but it is turning breezy here. For England and Wales, it's been a foggy start. That fog is taking a while to clear away, but revealing plenty of sunshine for most this afternoon. Temperatures about average, generally 8-9 degrees, but 10 or 11 across parts of northeast England and eastern Scotland, so quite mild here. It'll turn pretty cold pretty quickly again this evening across the south. The frost taking hold rapidly, and then the fog will thicken up once more overnight. Some dense patches of fog which will again be around for tomorrow morning's rush hour. Cloud increasing across Scotland and Northern Ireland, so again not as cold, not as frosty here, whereas in the south -5, -6 in rural spots. Another sunny one once that fog has cleared, but it will be around for the morning rush hour, and then the wind's really picking up during the course of Wednesday across the far northwest. Some rain coming in here later, but the wind's the greatest cause for concern. That could cause some disruption, certainly some travel issues with ferries being affected and some of the bridges here as well. Most places again having a dry day. A sunny one in the south once that fog has cleared. More cloud further north. We will see this rain sweeping in as we go through Wednesday evening across the parts of Scotland, Northern Ireland, followed by a little bit of snow over the hills, pushing into northern England. But again, as it pushes southwards, that rain will tend to fizzle out. And the outlook is generally dry, fairly cloudy over the course of the second half of the week, and slowly turning milder.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prisons?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed. So I guess they've always been quite woke. That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Clip that bit up.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions those days are gone, I can tell you. She's only teasing. Go on. He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Jubes and Kerr. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even some ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
He's the king of breakfast TV, and he's back.
Eamon Holmes, back on the TV
Surprised
with me this morning.
Even remember my name.
I know, it's been 4 months. You have holy water by your bed?
Oh, yes.
Oh, good.
Already to bless.
Oh, Eamon. Oh.
Why do you not believe anything I say?
Eamon Holmes back on GB News Breakfast at 6 a.m.
This year on GB News, we've got brand new members in the family.
Join us. Across the entire United Kingdom, we cover the issues that matter to you. GB News will always stay honest, balanced and fair. We want to hear whatever is on your mind.
And we don't talk down to you.
The establishment had their chance.
Now we're here to represent you.
Britain's watching.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
and right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512.
Virgin Media Channel 604.
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview Channel 236.
And YouView, channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. Now, I want to talk to you about dog bites. My panel are here, writer and broadcaster Amy Nickel and former special advisor to Michael Gove, Charlie Rowley. Guess how many people per year, you know this because we've looked at it, but how many people end up in hospital each year in the UK because of dog bites? 9,000 people. That is a huge number, Charlie. And we've had these two very high-profile cases recently, haven't we? There was the 28-year-old woman in Caterham. She was a dog walker, had 8 dogs, lost her life. A poor little 4-year-old girl in Milton Keynes was also mauled to death by a dog. And it's starting to sort of make its way into the headlines again, these stories of whether we should have more restrictions on dogs. What do you think?
Yeah, and two very tragic cases that you highlighted, and there are certain things that the council can do. I think, for example, in the first instance of the poor 28-year-old, I think the local council issue licences for a certain number of dogs you can walk. I think it was 6 at the time, and that individual was walking a couple more. But the point remains that these attacks seem to be on the up. Now, my only encounter with dogs is through delivering leaflets. If you're knocking on doors or campaigning, and you do get your fingers sort of nipped by a few pups that are sort of waiting behind the door. And for posties,
because you're a Conservative.
Well, who knows?
They let them off the
yes.
How could they do that to you, Charlie? You're so lovely.
Well, that's very, very kind, very kind. But for posties, and you hear about these horror stories all the time of just sort of, and so. I don't know quite what the answer is, but there does need to be more work, I think, in terms of making sure that pet owners are particularly responsible for looking after their dogs, that they are kept on the lead, perhaps in public places where some people, particularly during lockdown, I think dog ownership increased because of loneliness, and there is a role for dogs in society now.
A lot of these seem to happen domestically, and I think you brought up an interesting point there because you said the council limits you to 6 dogs, but we all know there's a big difference between 6 Jack Russells and 6 Rottweilers.
Yeah.
And the situation is that the Dangerous Dogs Act passed in 1991 and it banned certain breeds, but now people are breeding, crossbreeding. So one of the cases here was a pit bull crossed with a husky, and that's not in this legislation. So what they're discussing now is whether we need to bring back the idea of a dog licence. Yeah. Because to me, having a dog, a certain dog, I used to have a Belgian Malinois.
I have no idea what that looks like.
It's a bit like a police dog.
Oh, right.
A powerful dog.
Big dog.
That dog, massive dog, that in the wrong hands is a seriously dangerous weapon. So I think we need to take more seriously what these dogs are capable of if in the wrong hands.
I'm scared of all dogs. I don't mind admitting it. I literally was brought up in a family where all the women are scared of dogs and all the men love dogs. I don't know whether they found the gene for being scared of dogs, but I clearly have it. I've had to get better because my children love dogs. But I definitely in recent times have been a bit more like, well, most people look after their dogs, you know, probably not wanting to pass on my fear and therefore not teaching my kids actually to be mindful of dogs. The delivery person, still say delivery men. The delivery postmen and women, these numbers are really shocking. 2,500 to 3,000 dog bites happen every year to delivery people. And in the past 5 years, 1,000 of them have had their fingers amputated as a result of attacks through letterboxes.
It's so
that
shocking.
Really does make you think that they need to be... Well, then how do you could have a licence for the dog. Maybe it would still do that.
Well, people say, don't they, there's no such thing as a bad dog, just a bad owner. So I do think it comes back to the handling of the dog.
Yeah.
The behaviour is based on what it learns from the owner. I think the onus is definitely on whoever's keeping the dog.
And the numbers, as you said, Charlie, the numbers have absolutely boomed since lockdown. The number of dogs there were 13 million in the UK now, compared to 7.6 million in 2012. So 10 years they've you know, kind of doubled. So be careful with your dogs and be careful probably with your kids around dogs as well. Right, now...
Maybe get a cat.
Yeah. Now, coming up, today marks 11 days. Awful story. All of us can't stop thinking about it. Since the mother of two, Nicola Bulley, went missing. So we're asking, is there enough support provided to families of missing people? We're going to hear from an expert. That's all after your morning's news.
Good morning from the GB newsroom at 11:33. Here are the headlines. Rishi Sunak has revealed his new cabinet following a reshuffle this morning, whilst creating 4 new departments. Greg Hands takes over as the new Conservative Party chairman after Nadeem Zahawi was sacked. The Business, Trade and Culture departments have been broken down into separate units, with Grant Shapps now Secretary of State for a new Energy Security and Net Zero department aimed at securing long-term energy supply and bringing down bills. Kemi Badenoch is a new Secretary of State for Business and Trade. Lucy Fraser has become the Culture Secretary, taking over from Michelle Donnellan, who's been made a new Science and Technology Secretary. Eastern Turkey has been struck by a third earthquake measuring 5.7 this morning, as the number of people killed across the country and Syria has risen to more than 5,000. The first 7.8 magnitude quake hit yesterday morning, with the second major earthquake measuring 7.5 just a few hours later. Almost 6,000 buildings have been destroyed in the tremor and aftershocks. Rescuers continue to dig through the rubble in search for survivors. The BBC chairman has denied giving Boris Johnson financial advice, calling their relationship broadly professional. Richard Sharp has appeared for questioning before MPs. It's after it was revealed he was involved in helping secure Mr Johnson a loan of up to £800,000 before the then Prime Minister backed his appointment to the role at the BBC. His selection is under investigation. Shadow Climate Secretary Ed Miliband is calling on the government to bring forward a proper windfall tax on energy companies after BP announced its biggest yearly profit in history. The energy giant has more than doubled its earnings from the year before, earning £23 billion in profits in 2022 after energy prices surged due to the war in Ukraine. BP Chief Executive Bernard Looney says stronger plant reliability and a lower cost of production helped with profits. TV, online and DAB+ radio. This is GB News.
He's the king of breakfast TV and he's back.
Eamon Holmes back on the TV with me this morning.
Even remember my name.
I know, it's been 4 months. You have holy water by your bed?
Oh, yes.
Oh,
already to bless.
Yeah. Oh, Eamon. Oh.
Why do you not believe anything I say?
Eamon Holmes back on GB News Breakfast at 6 a.m.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Co.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Clip that bit off.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions those days are gone, I can tell you. She's only teasing. Go on. He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Jubes and Co. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
The guy went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions. I have no time for cultural totalitarianism. We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. Welcome back to Bev Turner Today. My guests, Charlie and Amy, will be back with me to discuss stories in just a moment. But first of all, every year, more than 200,000 missing person reports are made to the police in the UK alone, leaving an emotional effect on the families left behind. The case of 45-year-old mum of two, Nicola Bully, who's been missing for 11 days now, further emphasises how traumatic the ordeal can be for families of missing people. So joining me now to help understand this complicated and emotionally traumatic experience is the head of helplines and reconnections at Missing People, Paul Joseph. Good morning, Paul. What an important job you do. I think people will be shocked to realise how many folk are reported missing in the UK every year. That number is enormous, 200,000.
Yes, it is. And of course, as you said, there's every time that happens, there's families and people who care, look after, are worried about those people. A lot of cases are resolved relatively quickly, but even so, during that time, it's an incredibly traumatic thing to be going through.
Do you know, out of those 200,000 who are reported missing, how many eventually return to their families?
So the majority, in terms of the high 90%, I think about 98%, it will be resolved within 24 hours, whether that's a positive or negative outcome. And then there's still a considerable amount that remain missing after a week, and then a proportion of that remain missing even longer. So, yeah, it's a lot of people, a lot of families dealing with that unknown, that not knowing what's going on, the kind of panic, which obviously can then move to fears about what's happened, kind of disbelief. So lots of people really needing support and not necessarily knowing where to go or getting help with what's going on.
You would think, wouldn't you, that with technology and that we're all walking around, Paul, with effectively a tracking device in our pocket, that it would become easier to find people who go missing out of our lives. Is that the case? Because it doesn't sound like the numbers are necessarily reflecting that.
I think obviously technology can help in many ways, but of course, if you're thinking about somebody going missing, you're having to look at knowing exactly where they went missing from. If you can track that back, you can have more information. And obviously, with the investigation that's going on with Nicola at the moment, they have a lot of information about where she was and have narrowed it down to a very specific time. But obviously, if it's a case where someone maybe left work at a certain time and that's the last time someone saw them, and then it wasn't until 4 hours later they didn't turn up where they were supposed to be. So I think it's almost like, if you think about all the different things that can happen, it's whether the police know about a missing case quickly enough, whether they can access things quickly enough, whether they have the resources to do that. So, but it is surprising. We do feel like our lives are being monitored in many ways, but I think if you don't have a starting point for tracking someone, then that is a lot harder.
What's the first kind of route of enquiry that most people will take when someone that they love has apparently vanished? What's the first thing that you advise people to do?
Yeah, so I mean, people will normally check with where the person was. So maybe that might be with friends they were out with or with work colleagues, make the relevant calls and different things. Obviously, try their phone, try social media, or WhatsApp, all the different things. And then, obviously, if that doesn't there's no answers from that, then people should consider going to the police. People always think that you have to wait 24 hours before reporting people missing to the police, which isn't true. If the disappearance is out of character, you're worried about someone, we'd always say to contact the police. And we'd say, give us a call. We've got a helpline 116 000 that's here every day by phone, text and email. We can talk people through what to do. Our website also has lots of information about different things you can do, because if you think about the sort of panic and chaos when you're worried about someone, there might be small things you haven't thought about, and actually having someone to kind of bounce those ideas off might really help. But we would always say, don't hesitate in going to contact the police if you've done all the other things and are still worried about someone.
It doesn't feel appropriate to speculate about what's happened to Nicola Bulley. Everyone is just keeping their fingers crossed that she turns up safe and well. But give us an idea of what her family might be going through now, particularly the children. As professionals, what would your advice be to the family now and to the children?
Yeah, having someone missing can be an incredibly isolating thing, because we all have certain things that we go through in life, but maybe that's kind of shared with other people, such as bereavement, illness, loss, other things. So at least you can often connect with people and kind of maybe get some support in that way. But of course, not many people have had someone missing in their lives and don't know about it. And also, as well as dealing with a person not being there, you're dealing with not knowing what's happened. So we'd always say, reach out to get support from an organisation like ours. And of course, in a situation like this, when things are very high profile, there's lots of media attention, lots of speculation. So that makes it very hard for people to go about any of the normal things they would do in their routine anyway. So yeah, I'd say a situation where someone's missing, it can just be very, very isolating, very worrying. People are worried about their routine. People might feel like they don't want to leave the house in case a person comes back. Every phone call they make. So we'd always say, get support from someone like us, and also see what resources you've got around you in terms of friends and family. And sometimes people say, actually, well, maybe this friend will be the person who keeps an eye on this part of the social media. This friend can do something else. This person can be in touch with media. This person's family will be in touch with the police, and so on. Also, so everyone gets a bit of a break from the doing of the activity of trying to find them, and have a bit of time to actually deal with the emotions of what's going on as well.
OK, thank you, Paul. Really interesting insight there into the little-known world, really, of people who go missing every day. From Missing People, Paul Joseph there. Right, my panel are back with me this morning, writer and broadcaster Amy Nickel and former special advisor to Michael Gove, Charlie Rowley. Just your reflections on that, Amy. I shouldn't say sort of as a mum, but as mums, there is something deeply, deeply sad and moving about that story, isn't there?
Of course, because it almost makes you think of that moment in the supermarket where you look behind you and they're not there, and that feeling that you get. But only in this case, she didn't have the relief of realising they're just down the...
I know. And we just, we're worried about those kids, aren't we? And just really sad. If you've got any information about Nicola, if you just keep spreading it. Spread it on social media, tweet it, get it out there, get people aware who might have been driving down that road. Right, Charlie, we are going to be talking now. Oh, I want to talk about the cabinet reshuffle, right? Because loads of you have been getting in touch, right? Ollie, you said, I don't care about the mini reshuffle. If our Prime Minister doesn't show some backbone and steel, I'm afraid it'll be a case of Rishi Sunak out soon. And this one from Kevin. Michelle Donnellan, who has a history and politics degree, is now Science Secretary. I give up. The Tories are finished. Just address that, because we non-politicians often look and think, how can you go from being in charge of transport to suddenly being in charge of the NHS and be expected to be an expert on these? No wonder they're rubbish at it all.
Well, it's a legitimate question, and but I think the answer is that you can have a bit of both in the team, and there'll be people that have got the experience in a particular field that can go in and demonstrate huge knowledge in that particular area. But actually, sometimes there are departments where you do need a fresh pair of eyes, where you do need somebody that might be from a business background to come into a department that, you know, might be a bit clunky, that isn't operating or isn't, you know, firing on all cylinders. And with your experience, you can actually turn that experience and turn your hand into a department where you can actually make progress in an area that hasn't been made progress, where progress hasn't been made previously.
So you probably need to be a really good listener. You have to accept what the team is telling you with their wealth of experience. You have to have, Amy Nicole, sufficiently little ego that you can listen and take on board what the people in that particular industry wants to do, whilst also being, what, good decision maker, working with a team. I'm just thinking about the skills that you need to be one of these.
But I feel like by listing out all those skills, you've eliminated all the candidates.
How did I know you were going to say that? And you think the Labour lot would be better?
Absolutely.
Why?
Because they have solutions and they listen.
But do they have the skills that I've just been describing? Do they have those dynamic, forthright ambitions and vision for the nation?
I think there's certain candidates within the Labour Party who I really admire. Yvette Cooper, wonderful speaker, clearly a great listener, very compassionate with all the policies that she comes out with. Emily Thornberry as well, also got a good sense of humour, which I like in a politician, but without having that massive ego of the likes of maybe the Conservative frontbench.
Would you like to respond to that, Charlie?
Well, if Labour have got
terrible slur.
If Labour have got answers on all of these issues, I and Ollie and everyone else in the country looks forward to hearing them, because we haven't heard anything since, I don't think.
OK, right. Another story in the papers today. Head teachers will be warned not to keep parents in the dark over trans lessons. This is the Department of Education, who've told heads that they must share material on sensitive topics. Education Secretary Gillian Keegan urged to clarify her definition of a woman, of course. What do you think about this, Amy? You're very good on the trans issue. I know you feel very strongly that trans people get a bad...
Yeah, and I think that this is another classic example of some good old-fashioned fear-mongering, because really the story is ministers are reminding them to share LGBT teaching and their RSE policy. Now, that's already a given. RSE policy will be available on your school's website for across the board. And that's been mandatory for, I think, since it changed in 2020. So this is all a bit of a non-story to kind of poke parents into fearing that their children are going to be converted into being trans children, because that's what all us wokies want, which is actually quite ridiculous, because it is not woke to understand what trans teens need and the understanding and the attention that comes with that.
Sorry to interrupt you, Amy. We've got to go to a bit more breaking news. It's been one of those days. A former Met police officer, David Carrick, is being sentenced for crimes on sexual offences. Let's get more from Southwark Crown Court.
Your status. You have before you the prospect of a difficult time in custody for many years. You joined the Metropolitan Police in 2001. That put you in a unique position with exceptional powers to coerce and control. You will have sworn the oath taken by all police constables, which includes the following promise. I will, to the best of my power, cause the peace to be kept and preserved, and prevent all offences against the persons and properties of Her Majesty's subjects. In summarising the facts of the offences, I will not use names so that none of the victims lose the legal protection they are entitled to. You know who they are, and so do they. Nor is it necessary to repeat the detailed recital outlined by Mr. Little King's counsel in court this week. Certain themes emerge. Firstly, this violent sexual offending against women commenced almost immediately after you became a police constable, and you referred to your job when offending. Just over a year after gaining the office, while you were working in Merton Borough, you met a 20-year-old I will call T in a bar. You invited her to a housewarming party, which you said would be taking place at your flat nearby. You told her you were the safest person she could be with because you were a police officer. She went with you, reassured by this reasoning. There was no party. You held her against her will for hours. You raped her vaginally and anally using violence to hold her down. When she struggled, you put a black handgun to her head. It felt real, but of course she does not know if it was actually real, and it has not been recovered. She froze, terrified, believing you were going to rape and then kill her.
So that was the judge at Southwark Crown Court sentencing police officer David Carrick for multiple sexual offences. We will bring you the actual sentence as it happens. We're not at the end of the show yet, and my panel is still here. We will go back to that when we need to. Right. OK, guys, we were talking about trans story. This is teachers, and you were saying, Amy, this is teachers saying that they have to tell parents if there's going to be trans material in the classes, and that you think this is an unnecessary statement to make. So why would Education Secretary Gillian Keegan be making this statement now? What is she trying to do, Charlie?
Well, I actually don't think it's a negative at all. I think it's making sure that parents know that this education is taking place. And I don't think there'll be too much disagreement between me and Amy on this, because, look, I want people in this country, because of the brilliant country that we are, with liberty and equality, people should be able to feel the freedom to live their lives as they feel as they should. And I hate when this debate always gets reduced to what changing room people are going to be using, or what prison place we're going to bang them up in. And we've heard, obviously, the terrible case in Scotland, where it is absolutely right not to have a sexual predator, a sexual attacker, who is biologically a male, who has used his body as a weapon against women, to then be sentenced to a women's prison. That is wholly inappropriate in Scotland, and it's right that they're addressing that. But that is a small issue in a sense of the wider problem, which is that people who are trans do not have the access to education. They don't have the access to healthcare that they need in order to make sure that their lives are as free and as able and as they are able to live their lives as freely and successfully as the rest of us.
Amy, my concern with so much support for trans people. Let me rephrase that, because as I've said before, I think people who are genuinely troubled in that way and they see the solution to their depression and their happiness is to change their gender. I think the problem is, are we not normalising what should be given a lot more time towards what is a mental health dysfunction?
Well, I refute that being trans is at all a mental health dysfunction. I think it's just an innate characteristic. That...
Do you, though?
Yes,
do you not see it rising out of trauma in a lot of cases, though, and the solution is to change my gender?
Yeah, so one of the findings of the Cass report that looked into this really, really thoroughly was that quite often it can be misrepresented, and it can be that the person isn't trans at all and they're suffering from something else.
Yeah.
And it's important that they have access to the healthcare that Charlie mentioned to differentiate and find out what's really going on with that young person before any wrong interventions are made. Unfortunately, because this this subject has got so toxic, and stories like this really don't help, it's led to a lot of the parents mentioned in this story having assumptions about this subject, which means that the stigma that is affecting trans people has increased so much that there is also a space for children to be able to tell their teachers in confidence, because going home and telling their parents will have really negative repercussions.
But they must, if they're going to talk to their teachers about that, the teachers must have a responsibility to go to the parents and say, this is what your child has said to me.
I don't agree. I think in some cases it's important. In the same way with some parents' attitudes to sexuality, if they tell their teacher in confidence, sometimes there is a place for that confidence to be kept for the safety and risk to the child at home.
Yeah, but I totally disagree. I think if they're under 16, it should always be the parents' responsibility. Guys, we've come to the end of our show. We've had a lot of interruptions. You've done very well. We buckled up and we made it to the end. Charlie Rowley, Amy Nicole, thank you so much. I'll see you both again. Right, coming up next is GB News Live with Mark Longhurst. He'll have all the fallout of all the political shenanigans that have been going on this morning. I'm Bev Turner. I'll see you tomorrow at 10.
Hello, I'm Alex Deakin, and this is your latest weather update from the Met Office. Sparkling winter sunshine for many. Quite a bit of cloud across parts of the north, and a little bit of light rain and drizzle across parts of southern Scotland. That's from this weather front, but it's weakening all the time as it bumps up against this area of high pressure. Another one will arrive during tomorrow, and the isobars squeezing together. That's going to bring some strong winds across parts of Scotland. The one today, though, is bringing a bit more cloud and a little bit of light rain and drizzle here and there across the east of Northern Ireland, southwest Scotland. Sunny spells in the far northwest, but it is turning breezy here. For England and Wales, it's been a foggy start. That fog is taking a while to clear away, but revealing plenty of sunshine for most this afternoon. Temperatures about average, generally 8-9 degrees, but 10 or 11 across parts of northeast England and eastern Scotland, so quite mild here. It'll turn pretty cold pretty quickly again this evening across the south. The frost taking hold rapidly, and then the fog will thicken up once more overnight. Some dense patches of fog, which will again be around for tomorrow morning's rush hour. Cloud increasing across Scotland and Northern Ireland, so again, not as cold, not as frosty here, whereas in the south, -5, -6 in rural spots. Another sunny one once that fog has cleared, but it will be around for the morning rush hour, and then the wind's really picking up during the course of Wednesday across the far northwest. Some rain coming in here later, but the wind's the greatest cause for concern. That could cause some disruption, certainly some travel issues with ferries being affected and some of the bridges here as well. Most places again having a dry day, a sunny one in the south once that fog has cleared, more cloud further north. We will see this rain sweeping in as we go through Wednesday evening across the parts of Scotland, Northern Ireland, followed by a little bit of snow over the hills, pushing into northern England. But again, as it pushes southwards, that rain will tend to fizzle out, and the outlook is generally dry, fairly cloudy over the course of the second half of the week and slowly turning milder.
I'm Camilla Tominey. Join me on GB News on Sunday mornings for a politics show with personality on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me. So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi, Andrew Pierce here. Join me every Friday lunchtime for a proper no-nonsense debrief of the week's events. With special guests in the studio and the GB News team on the ground, I'll be getting you up to date with news, some intelligent discussion and my own sharp take. The weekend starts here with me every Friday lunchtime on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512,
Virgin Media Channel 604,
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview Channel 236 and YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio,
with the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Very good afternoon. It's 12 noon. You're with GB News Live. I'm Mark Longhurst, and coming up for you this hour. Rishi Sunak has reshuffled his cabinet and also reorganised Whitehall's departments. Tory member favourite Kemi Badenoch leading a new business and trade department, while Grant Shapps now heads up a new standalone energy department covering net zero. But plenty more numbers for Michelle Donnellan as she gets a new science